Good afternoon. Everyone enjoy lunch, I trust? All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started, and thanks for the intro. We're going to allow each of the panelists also to do a little bit more of elaborated introduction as well. So maybe we could start with you, David.
So I work for the consumer, I lead the consumer research team for Cirque, so we, Cirque Soleil. So we cover consumer research for basically across the world, our global operations. We focus it a lot in North America, especially with our Las Vegas team. But if not, we cover basically any place that you can imagine a Cirque Soleil show has been, we've done research there.
I'm Michelle Gucci, and I am at Merck currently. I have 15 plus years of pharmaceutical experience. I'm working in new products at this time, and I support both physician and consumer insights in the US.
I'm Stacy Simons. I work on the Orbitz brand within Expedia, and I've been there about 5.5 years. 5 of those were focused on primary consumer insights. So working with various business teams on everything from brand research to product research and customer satisfaction. And a few months ago, just picked up what we call customer experience. So that is really the kind of seamless operation of our websites. So it's been interesting to kind of try to connect the dots between the two worlds. So that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. So the topics, just to recap with everyone, reclaiming the human aspect of a data-driven world, capitalizing on things like social media forums, moving beyond just social listening, and understanding and why qualitative researchers need to reclaim their work within the context of big data. So what we're going to do is try to keep this a nice, easy, open flow. Each of our expert panelists have some stories and knowledge and experience they'd like to share with you, but we don't have to wait till the end for questions. If you have a question or a comment, remark, please just let us know, and we'll field those as we go through the next 30 minutes that we have together. So Stacy, maybe we'll start with you and let you kind of share your experiences.
Yep. What's been really interesting is when I joined Orbitz 5+ years ago, it was a highly transactional and clickstream data focused organization, which is the heart of big data. I mean, just terabytes of data, billions of clicks to the websites. But there wasn't a lot kind of beyond that of understanding of the why behind those clicks. So what we've been able to do is really add into it both quantitative research, but also qualitative to really enhance the understanding that the teams have, and it has really led to different decisions than previously, because it used to be based on kind of the gut of everyone in the organization individually. Now there's actually sort of a common tool and language we can use to talk about the whys. And so the one example, John asked us to think about kind of an example of where we've used qualitative to augment what we see from big data was really in the development of our loyalty program, Orbitz Rewards. And from the very beginning, there was definitely an interest in making it a very consumer-centric program. We hadn't really done that before. And so we were able to use Qual on top of things like in-market testing to understand why consumers responded to different versions of the program. And because we're very much a test and learn organization, we actually had 4 or 5 different versions of the program we actually rolled out with, and then saw what the reactions were. But there were certain things that we saw in the data that couldn't just be explained. So our program is it's an instant reward program. So basically you book a flight or hotel and you get instant dollars that you can actually use towards your next hotel. But we saw people not doing that. They might book a hotel, but then they would bank the dollars. And we didn't quite understand that until we actually went and did online bulletin boards and discussion groups with customers. And we found some people, they could be booking a business trip and they don't want to use that leisure dollar figure, whether it's a policy issue or it's just a personal preference. They wanted to save it until they had a leisure trip coming up. Or sometimes people are they like to collect. They're just collectors of points or dollars. And for them, it's more meaningful for them to save up and spend $50 all at once versus $5 10 times. And so those are the kinds of things we would not have had the insights around had we not coupled the in-market testing with qualitative, and then that informed quantitative research we did also to follow up. So it's really been a great complement to the learnings we're getting from the big data of the kind of the test and learn environment.
Stacey, what was your approach for capturing those qualitative insights, like they would save up and they didn't want to spend it because they were on business?
Yeah, so we actually looked at their behavior, and I personally cherry-picked some customers to talk to. So it's very much like the example of the content, kind of automated, where if somebody has done something, you can then follow up on it. We use that kind of methodology to do that. And then we also had we invite every 4 to 5 months or so a group of our top customers to come together and talk about their experiences. And it also emerged there, particularly this issue around business travel versus leisure travel and what their behavior is for how they act differently for those different kind of trips.
All right. Thanks, Stacey. David, would you like to share?
So it's no surprise that one of our biggest focus in Cirque Soleil is Las Vegas. It represents a good portion of our ticket sales. And one of the things in Vegas is that the millennial population is growing, but they're not necessarily as interested or as willing to go to our shows as maybe older generations. So it's about understanding what could be the drivers to get them to go. And because we don't have them obviously in our data, necessarily our ticket database, we had to go and speak to them and sort of live the life of millennials as they're in Vegas to better understand that, because there was no basically other way that we could use our data to understand how they act and how they react when they're in Vegas. So basically, that absence of information there forced us to go to the qualitative route.
And David, I mean, can you share some of the research techniques that you were able to see through the eyes of millennials as part of that process?
So we would pick them up at the airport, ride along with them, go in with, join them as they're in the clubs, the hotels, really sort of hang out with them, whether at the side of the pool or in the bars, to really get the sense of what moments they had during their Las Vegas journey.
I remember, David, doing some research in Asia, and we're trying to understand the millennials. And there was a phenomenon we found that they would go in these groups of 6 to 8, and they were looking for entertainment experiences, and that radically changed the way we looked at designing like recreation facilities and spas and such, because typically those spas were only there to accommodate 1 or 2 couples at very most. Mm-hmm. Were there any radical insights you gained from studying their behaviors in the broader view?
Well, one of the biggest implications, I think, for live entertainment is that aspect that they don't feel like or don't want to stick to a similar time schedule as the older generations might. So if you tell them, yeah, the show starts at 9:30, that's maybe a bit of a turnoff. So it's about thinking about how to speak to them in their sort of flexible time terms, that they don't go to Vegas to have a rigid schedule. They go to Vegas to sort of live, if you will. So it's about trying to get them interested in certain aspects or different types of shows that could attract them.
Okay, great. All right, and Michelle?
So for those of you who know pharma, know that we're a conservative company. I need to say that my opinions do not necessarily represent the opinions of Merck, Sharp and Jones. So I got my disclaimer out. I will be safe to go home now. So the challenge that I faced was at Merck, we have a daily product, which is a brand that is leading in terms of the class and is a leaded branded product in the market. So my challenge was I was given a weekly drug, which is going to compete in the same class as this daily drug. And of course, management said, do your best, launch this, but by the way, don't cannibalize our premium brand here. So that was kind of our challenge. So the way that we started, of course, was we started with quantitative data. So, we did our forecasting study, we did our demand study, we knew how much market share we could expect. We also looked at the overlap in terms of the patients. And unfortunately, it was close to like an 80% overlap. We did our segmentation, and we segmented our physicians and our nurse practitioners and our other types of healthcare providers. So the next question that came up, and management kept asking this was, okay, well, who's your patient? So we know who the patient is that's on the daily medicine, but who's your patient for the weekly? Oh, and by the way, the sales reps, they're gonna carry both products. So when they go in, they need to be able to say to the doctor, okay, this is for the daily, and this is the patient for the weekly. So of course, that's where Qual comes in. Those questions couldn't be answered by any kind of quantitative survey. So what we did, I'd like to coin it as linguistic research, and it was a Qual study, and it had 2 phases. So the first thing that we did is we surveyed all our internal stakeholders and all of our agencies, and we said, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to come up with these patient profiles or patient descriptions. So based on this research, that's what we did. We then went into step 2, which was the actual qualitative research with our healthcare providers. And what we used is a technique called response dial sessions. Probably a lot of you are familiar with those. But what it does is you get an actor, and the actor actually records these descriptions of these patient profiles. And then you have your 5 or 6 respondents sitting there, and you show them your product profile first, and then you say to them, okay, we're gonna show you Mary. And based on the product profile that you've seen, when you hear these characteristics of Mary, can you dial up if you think it's appropriate for her, or down if you think it's not appropriate for her? So we went through these iterations, and the great thing about the technique is you can iterate on the fly. So for instance, if she was lazy and that didn't seem to work, we could automatically insert that she was ambitious or she cared about her treatment. So it was through this qualitative technique that basically we came out with these 2 relevant patient profiles, which would actually define our weekly drug. And then when we took this back into Quant, we saw that the overlap went from about an 80% down to about a 44%. So we'll take it. I mean, it wasn't as low as we wanted it to be, but in the end, we couldn't have gotten there without the Qual.
That's a dramatic drop on overlap. What were the benefits to the business in making that dramatic drop in terms of business outcomes?
Well, millions and millions of dollars, of course.
So that's a pretty good project then.
It is, but I mean, I think at the end of the day too, when you talk to some of our sales force, which we did, it gave them confidence and peace of mind, because they could answer that question for the doctor, and they could say, no, the person, there is really a difference. I mean, and the one big thing that we found out is it's all about good intent. So, some doctors connect adherence and compliance with, trouble taking a daily med. But some of them said, hey, if I can't trust you on a daily basis, I'm not gonna put you on a weekly pill. But it was all about good intent. So if you're the type of person that, you try and you miss a few doses here and there, they're gonna give you that benefit of the doubt. So that was like an insight that rose to the top that we could have never gotten had we not used that particular technique.
What were the most challenging things in changing behavior across that process in terms of sales account representatives or other stakeholders where you're kind of changing their behaviors and the benefits they used to realize by having the 80% overlap?
Well, I think going in, people had a lot of predisposed ideas about who the daily patients are and who they actually wanted the weekly patients to be. And I don't think they wanted to have to go through that deep emotional pursuit of it. They just wanted to say, it's better for compliance, just use it for anybody who won't comply. So I think we kind of had to change the mindset, and it was through, again, that technique where you could see the people dialing up when, you saw a mother who was harried, who was like trying to, do her job during the day and then transport her kids to activities at night, that, invoked that sympathy with the healthcare providers that said, what, this may actually help them. And in the end, the other insight we got is it's gonna help me. So to the healthcare providers, it was also about them and them succeeding, and this could help them succeed as well as their patients.
Good. Thanks, Michelle. I've got a list of fastball questions for our expert panel here, but I'll put those to the side. Any questions from the group here, from the stories you heard, from Stacy, David, and Michelle?
Thank you this is Yvonne Ferguson, Get Qualitative. David, I had a question for you in terms of knowing what you knew about millennials. Did Cirque change their advertisements and change sometime their marketing toward that population based on the results of what you found?
I think what we found sort of maybe goes beyond the sort of promotional aspects of it and speaks more to possible future changes in product or how that is. So it was deeper than just trying to change behavior based on messaging. I don't think that was going to succeed with that. It was basically to accept that this generation lives certain experiences differently than perhaps other ones. So it's still being absorbed, I would say, and so no changes have been made as of yet. But again, I think it would go deeper than maybe just our messaging for the moment.
Any other questions before we move on to the next phase? All right, great. So tell us a little bit about your companies. I know we've got a disclaimer here for one. We'll get that kind of shining up there. But do your companies have a bias or preference for quant versus qual or mixed? What does the culture operate like?
Yes, so our quant bias is dramatic. I mean, I think because they grew up, it's an e-commerce organization who grew up in, on clickstream data. I mean, that was kind of the main source. And so because of that, and also the precision that affords you, so when we do a test, we're looking for 0.0023% changes because we have millions of visitors. And so it created this interesting environment where, introducing a sample size of even 1,000 people is challenging. So I have tried to, I think I probably skew more to quantitative techniques for research purposes because of that, but have definitely shown the value of Qual as a complement and the why behind the data we have. But that's been one of the huge learnings for me is just being culturally appropriate contributes to the success, I think, of the organization, of an insights organization. And for Orbit/Expedia, I think quantitative is really critical.
What are some things you did to get them through that journey and that level of acceptance?
I think creativity and approach is one of those things, and I love Michelle's example of how she creatively used Qual. So trying to make sure, one, that is very a collaborative research development process, even in qualitative projects. So we've done some ethnography we've used over the shoulder before, actually. And so I think, using a technological approach to qualitative has increased the buy-in of the organization because we are tech-centric, and trying to partner also with research organizations that have very good tech credentials, who build their own apps or have just had a lot of experience in e-commerce. That seems to help as well.
David, how about you?
Our organization basically, our main metric is basically ticket sales. So I think that speaks to sort of a quant bias there. But given the immeasurability of certain aspects of our product, it comes that Qual is widely accepted. Everyone, of course, likes to hear the quant numbers. They like to say, well, how does this compare to this? But I think Qual passes easier at Cirque than maybe other places I've seen in the past.
David, just could a hypothesis be that that's also a function of your culture? It's very creative, it's creating entertainment. Do you think maybe that has something to do with the acceptance of the Qual, or do you think it's many things?
I think it's many things because we still have the separation of business and creation. So we still do have that distinctly business thought process that drives us in a certain direction, and we also have this certain distinctive creative aspect that drives us in possibly the same direction, possibly a different direction. So I think it helps to have that aspect there, but there's no denying that there is a big background of numbers.
And Michelle, any thoughts on this from your cultural perspective?
So ours is kind of mixed. Again, because we judge on scripts and new scripts, it's very quantitative, and we do have a lot of data like that. However, in our organization, it's almost about how do I need to use this or how do I need to present? So, everybody quotes numbers, but when you're going up to the board to say why this product should be pursued or not, you want that qual and you want those quotes and you want those little videos, and literally that's what's done. So a lot of times somebody will come and say, we're doing messaging. Well, we should do quant. No, we really want to hear the quotes. So it's almost dictated by the end result that they need.
Well, the good news is we qualitative researchers don't confuse them with confidence intervals and t-tests and p-values and stuff like that. We've got rich verbatims and observations. Just by raise of hands, organizations, and I'll ask it three different ways, a bias towards quant, qual, or kind of mixed. Quant bias, all right, qual, and then a mix. Okay, a little bit more of a mix. And then a few didn't raise hands, so they're not doing research. Okay, all right. Here's an interesting question. What would happen in a world, in just a few words, in a world of only quantitative data, in your own words? Stacey?
I think you end up focusing on efficiency and optimization and incremental change versus revolutionary change would be my guess, because it's all based on how well something does by the numbers without
Incremental
the
versus radical.
yeah.
Okay. And Michelle?
I think we'd have a lot more products that fail in the market because we wouldn't have known why the previous ones have succeeded, so less chance of making it.
Less probability of success, thanks. Yep.
I think maybe we'd see a short-term burst in ticket sales, and then over time it would decrease. I think that's how it would be in our organization.
Okay. How about in the audience? A world of just quantitative data in a few words. What would that look like? Would it be a bad thing, a good thing? So say, yeah, disaster? But thanks for sharing your point of view. Say more about that. What does that disaster look like?
So this is and I love the way that this panel is sort of finding its way to this already, and the CEO of Gallup hit this point, and a lot of other people have hit this point. A world with quantitative and no qualitative would be devoid of empathy and actual insight and innovation, because Julie, you made a great point. One of the great things about fantastic ethnography is the people who are making decisions are not just making them off numbers, they're making it off of actual empathy, incredibly important. And we hear from a lot of clients who say, you know what, the numbers prove things out, and the numbers allow us to have confidence, and the data, there's a huge role for that, obviously. But the qualitative, and whether it's face-to-face or through the smartphone or ethnographic or whatever else it is, the innovations and the ideas and the sparks and the things that drive us forward a lot of times come from qualitative. And I think that's where your CEO said, if you look at the huge decisions that companies are making, in many, many cases they're qualitative over quantitative, and I think that's why.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Oh, we have one more. Great. Yes?
Maybe you can remind me, I forget who said it yesterday, but they always pull an empty chair in their meetings. And that's the chair of the consumer. And I think that's what qualitative gives us and keeps our focus on the consumer.
And I think as well, quantitative can be so structured and very just dependent on your inputs versus qual gives you an opportunity for spontaneous things to happen and information and insight that you would gather that you wouldn't be able to gather in a quantitative setting.
Wonderful, thanks. Your point of view on is the DNA, the natural inherent talent of a qualitative versus a quantitative researcher more different or more the same? David?
I think in both aspects, for the qualities of it, I think it's that curiosity. So I think there are slight differences in it, but I think if you start with that curiosity, and to the audience point there of letting yourself explore, whether you explore the comments in Qual or let yourself sort of mine the numbers and see and let the numbers speak to you. So I would say that there's an intersection of both, and I think for me it begins with curiosity.
The commonness of curiosity, thank you. And Michelle?
I think there's similarities, but there are, key differences. And I honestly think what may drive you is more your interest. So I find a lot of quantitative people have a lot of analytical interests. They like the numbers. Qualitative, maybe more of the social sciences, the interest in the human emotion and the drivers.
Okay, thanks.
And I would say we don't tend to separate the two in our organization. So because I think there's you make different decisions if you allow folks to use a full range of techniques versus just qual versus just quant. Because there's a little bit of left brain, right brain sometimes skew that you see for qual versus quant, I think. And if you can sort of force folks to potentially cover an area they're not as comfortable doing, you sometimes get, I think, more creativity in the outcome and the both the design of the research and then the outcomes, I think. So I like to kind of think of them together.
Mm-hmm. When I work with our other chief scientist, Dr. John Fleming, he's a quant expert. We like to tell people, John will tell you what's important, and I'll tell you why it's important as that blend. So the last question that we have is around what barriers, and open to the panel and the audience, the question, just some examples of some significant barriers you have to overcome to tell the whole story, because even though we all work for great companies and we all present beautiful case studies, there's some things that we have to go through to deliver that. So if you want to share personal experiences other than ones you have, that'd be great.
So for me, I would say it's time. Like if you're going to do a quantitative study, you're in the field sometimes 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and then if you want to follow up on qual, that's another 4 or 6 weeks. Management doesn't have time or won't take the time to wait for those answers. So they want you do one or the other, and you just kind of go with it. So I would say it's the time and the patience, maybe to even find a way, which we talked about here, to how to speed things up a little bit.
You have a situation where you maybe have done 2 qualitative interviews and they want a recap of it.
And make a decision.
Yeah, that's a great example. Sorry, Stacey?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's been, there's an evolution in expectations where, when I used to work at GM, and we would produce 120-page decks without even a thought. Today, they want a page. It's just a page of what's the most important, 3 things that I need to know. It's just very different, and there's cultural differences between organizations too, that some are willing to spend time and dig into the data, and I find my current organization that's not the case.
I think there's also, for me sometimes, is that danger of having a too good a quote in the qual that you want to share, but that they're going to run with it. And that's going to be what they're going to stick with. I know sometimes it can help us, but other times, it's tempting to want to include it in. But so there's also that sort of fine line of wanting to present that interesting story, but knowing that certain features of that story might be disorienting, and they might run with it and not get the final point you want to present.
And this would be like a colorful use of language, or when you say something that would get their detracting attention?
Yeah, exactly. Colorful use of language. Whether we do, poolside interviews in Vegas, you can imagine what type of swimwear is being used there. So, it's a good quote or an interesting quote, but it's hard to necessarily use it in the video footage that gets delivered in the end. Although at Cirque Soleil, sometimes it'll pass a bit easier.
This has been wonderful. Thank you. Any other closing comments or questions from the audience? All right, well, this is excellent. Let's give them a hand of applause.